Welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. On the program this morning, we're going to have the candidate for Corning City Council in the 4th Ward, Lisa Illig-Homan. She's going to be joining us in just a little bit. We have more on our discussion about the budget. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano weighed in on what he's seeing. We'll tell you a little bit about what he had to say. It was interesting. If you recall earlier in the week, we mentioned that Governor Hochul had this kind of shady character that worked for her. He was a guy that really she depended on for which direction her campaign was going to go down. And there was a lot of criticism because she, instead of focusing on crime, which Lee Zeldin was doing at the time, this gentleman was, and well, we'll find out in a moment, not much of a gentleman. This person wanted to steer her into focusing more on abortion issues. So a lot of flack was thrown at this guy's direction. He was based out of rural Colorado. So right there, how does he know about what's facing us in upstate or downstate New York? Well, the New York Times latched onto this and really, and again, if you are a Democrat, specifically in New York State, you do not want the New York Times to be going after you. It just doesn't happen. But for whatever reason, they really ran with it, and now it's only gotten worse. So she dumps him. She fires him. Andrew Sullivan was his name. And so you probably figure, well, the story's over with. They did an expose I believe just this morning. Now they're accusing this ex-advisor of sexual harassment complaints in the past. Again, a lot of weird red flags on this. You've got an advisor based out of Colorado that his only big name client was Governor Hochul. I'm not going to get into the specifics. You can find it for yourself. I know there's younger people watching this morning, and I will say it's probably language we just won't use on the air to exactly describe the sexual harassment complaints. But let's just say he said very inappropriate things to coworkers at various times throughout his job. So women came forward once the New York Times broke the story about Mr. Sullivan working for Governor Hochul. She did cut ties with him. It was on Sunday, so we brought it up on Monday's program. And, of course, she gave the obligatory statement of, I'm disappointed. We never saw this pattern of troubling behavior, those type of things. Now, Sullivan, who's 43 years old, bounced around the country as a campaign manager for other Democrats as a part of a different group, and then started working really exclusively with Governor Hochul. 4 people who worked with him going back years before his tenure at the Hub Project, which the Hub Project worked with many leading Democrats, described incidents to the New York Times in which he made unwanted sexualized remarks. So the only reason I bring this up before we talk about the budget is if Governor Hochul thought this was going to go away, clearly it is not. And this was done by Nicholas Fandos and Jeffrey C. Mays at the New York Times. I'm curious what's going on behind the scenes. Why the New York Times, are they not happy with Governor Hochul's stances? I mean, I don't know why they would be disappointed as a far left outlet. It seems like they'd be happy. Maybe it was because she went after even minuscule changes to bail reform, or maybe they believe she hasn't gone far enough left. To learn a little bit more about Mr. Sullivan, he had a low profile. He never took a job in state government and had no formal campaign title, and was paid more than $500,000, mostly through a secretive arrangement that kept his name off of campaign finance records. He also worked from his home, again, in Colorado. So not really knowing what the best interests in New York would be, but I just wanted to mention, because it's something we'll follow closely, why they have decided to latch onto her. Now, they're not the only ones. The New York Post does a lot of reporting on Governor Hochul, and they're not happy specifically with the budget. But I don't know how much you followed with the emergency powers that Governor Hochul used. See, this was a way to, again, there's this amount of transparency. Not even that much. I don't even know if that's enough in the budget process. I don't even know if it's that transparent. But by using these emergency powers, we had even less time as residents of New York State to dive into what they were actually, and the politicians themselves, what they were actually going to be able to vote on with this. So what the New York Post highlighted, let me go to their browser, it's kind of interesting. So she declared a budget emergency. And what was the next thing she did? She goes to a Democrat fundraiser at Yankee Stadium. Government watchdog groups slammed her for making the declaration and then just leaving lawmakers saying, you have very little time to look this over, to see what you like in the budget, see what you don't like, have the debates, as she casually went to the Bronx Bombers fundraiser like nothing was going on. This is John Caney, director of the watchdog group Reinvent Albany. It was an emergency. She had to go to a Yankee game. It's obnoxious that the governor had time to raise money at a Yankee game while she was busy abusing her emergency powers so the public doesn't get a chance to see the bills. And that's what it always boils down to, so that we, as the public, don't know how bad this budget's going to be. Now, we know it's $229 billion. That we had an idea on, but we didn't know about all the policy that was in there. Hochul had issued emergency waivers known as messages of necessity, so the legislature could immediately vote on the tax and spending bills while bypassing the 3-day waiting period required by the state constitution. So what was the emergency? What a scam. So that was put into the Constitution so that we would have a chance to look it over. So we as citizens could say, well, we like this, we don't like this. 3 days isn't enough, by the way, for a $229 billion budget, but at least it's something. She said, never mind that. We're going to declare an emergency, put out a message of necessity, and the residents of New York will be none the wiser. That provision is intended to give legislators and the public time to review bills before they get passed. Well, there you are. Well, we're going to talk about the budget, but like they said, it was an emergency. She had to catch the Yankees game. Must be before opening pitch. We've got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on Marcus Street in Corning. We've talked about the gas stove ban that came from the budget. We know the cost that this will burden taxpayers with. Now, of course, as of right now, it's on new construction. But there has been a lot of pushback saying, think about the residents of New York that maybe do want to build a new home in the future, or businesses that are trying to expand, trying to come to the state, and that extra cost. And then, of course, what really it boils down to is the grid is not ready. We are not there. But Andrea Stewart-Cousins, the Senate Majority Leader, she said, we will never burden everyday New Yorkers in our climate fight. I wonder if we can hold her to that, because I think we could already say that she has not followed through on that promise. We will never burden everyday New Yorkers in our climate fight or ask them to give up more than our greatest polluters. That means you can keep your gas stove. Well, thank you. Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, thank you for allowing us to keep our gas stoves. We appreciate that. You can stay in the home you've always known. Well, again, thanks for being so kind. And you can keep the job you've always had. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I don't know. Would people that work at the gas company agree? But anyway, we are simply building climate-conscious policies into these spaces. There's a lot we could dissect there. I've never been a big fan of politicians in general saying, you can do this, you can keep this. It happens a lot with debates over the Second Amendment. Well, you're allowed to keep your squirrel gun. Wasn't that what Biden said at one point? Your squirrel hunting gun? You're allowing us that, even though it's in the Constitution? Anyway, I don't want to go on a tangent there. Gavin Donahue, president of the Independent Power Producers of New York, said that the power is not there. It's too much of a strain on the state's electric grid. Some are estimating that the new energy needs would require a grid with a capacity at least 4 times larger than what it is today. He said, quote, "In today's environment, we don't have enough electricity to make these goals happen." And that's been one of the major issues with all the green initiatives in New York State and throughout the country. We are not there yet. We do not have the capability. So yes, we are virtue signaling by saying we want this done by this date, and this is going to be done by this date. But the technology is simply not there. And think if we need a grid 4 times higher, who is going to pay for that? It's either going to be paid for by taxpayers, most likely, or it's going to be paid for by consumers on the back end. So either way, it's going to affect us, and probably both ways if you want to know the truth. So we'll see increase in costs, even though, again, Andrea Stewart-Cousins saying they would never burden everyday New Yorkers in our climate fight. Again, I hope that we can hold her to that. We've got other issues from the budget that I want to tie in with what Assemblyman Phil Palmisano had to say, which he's focused on energy policies already. I know I keep promising this. By the way, I haven't done this yet this morning. Let me put up my contact information because we had some great points yesterday. But Phil Palmisano and I are going to spend a whole show soon on just the energy policies and what that will mean for our state and really for our local communities. Because again, this program is about highlighting things that affect our communities and about building up our community. So we'll be hearing a little bit from Assemblyman Phil Palmisano a little bit later on. We do have to take another short break, so stay with us. Again, my guest this morning, Lisa Illig-Homan, she'll be our guest in just a little bit, candidate for Corning City Council in the 4th Ward. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Talking about what we're going to be talking about in just a moment with Lisa Illig-Homan. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and this is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program. Lisa, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thanks for having me, Frank. I'm excited to be here.
Well, this is exciting. It's show business.
It is.
Let's talk a little bit about yourself. You're running for candidate for Corning City Council in the 4th Ward, so tell us about yourself.
All right, so my name is Lisa Illig-Homan. Like you said, born and raised in Corning, New York, so I lived here first 18 years of my life. I went to high school over at the East High, graduated from there.
I'm not even going to hold that against you. I'm a West High boy.
Oh, boy. Graduated from there, went to college at Binghamton.
Okay.
Fell in love with a man in the Army who is now my husband, so we lived all over the country. We've lived up near Canada, Arizona, Texas, etc. Always wanted to get back here.
Of course.
So after, 10 years, we were finally able to move back and are so excited to be home. We have 2 kids that we're raising here, and just excited to kind of dip my toe into the world of politics and giving back to this community that I really do love and worked hard to get back to.
Yeah. Why did you decide to run? Because that is a tough decision to make. It takes up a lot of your time.
It does, yeah. Thank God I have a supportive husband
Right.
that kind of encouraged me. This is going to sound cliche, or like I Googled what to say when someone asks you why you ran, but I have kind of this moral conundrum that I have so many friends and family in my life that are nurses, teachers, police officers, and what they do every day tangibly gives back to the community and makes this world, a slightly better place. I sit at my computer for 8 or 9 hours a day, work in IT, I have my headset on and just sit at my laptop, and it's really not, fulfilling, and I don't feel like I'm giving back. So this really felt like a way where I could kind of supplement my day job with something that actually will help the community be a little bit of a better place.
Make a difference.
Yeah.
Are there things that you see maybe when you're out, and we're going to talk about petitions in a second, but when you're talking to people in the 4th Ward, are there things that stick out to you that you want to see changed?
I mean, I heard a lot of the typical things, potholes, stop signs, things like that. I think the biggest thing top of mind for people in the community right now with the recent assessments are the impact on taxes and things like that. So it's not necessarily that I want to change the taxes. I am not running on a platform that I'm going to lower your taxes or anything. But I do want to understand and get involved in how that money's being spent, what we're spending it on, what we're not spending it on, and things like that. So.
And to do what's best for the taxpayer.
Exactly,
should always be the goal, right? One of the things I probably should have started our interview with, because it does get a little confusing with wards. Tell us a little bit about the 4th Ward.
Okay, yeah. So I live 1 block from Carter School.
Okay.
So I am on like the easternmost side of the 4th Ward. So it goes kind of from Carter School all the way over toward McKinney Park, toward Field Street, Mountain Brow, Sunset Drive, that area. So really the very western part of the hill.
So you had a lot of walking to do for petitions.
Oh yeah, up and down the hills.
I always like to talk. This is such a politically nerdy thing for me to ask, but I think the petition process is such a fascinating process.
It is. It was a learning curve for me. There were so many things. I was very nervous at first because it was like, must be an ink, must be a signature,
Oh,
can't
yeah.
be handwriting, all that stuff. I didn't want to screw it up.
No, and because you overanalyze, and then someone starts to write something wrong, and no, I understand that process. Did you find when you did knock on doors? I know it's more difficult in recent years ever since COVID, but did you find people having good conversations with you about what the problems were that they were facing?
It really varied. Some people were just, let me sign and get you out of here. Then,
Yeah.
because we do it in March now, so it was cold,
Yes.
and if you stand in the threshold of someone's house
Yeah.
with the door wide open for too long, some people were super inviting, wanted me to come in, have a cup of coffee,
Isn't that nice?
and talk. Yeah, it was really nice, and I interacted with a lot of people. One of them was my school secretary from Carter School when I was 6 years old, and people I didn't know were my neighbors.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
You do get to learn a lot about your neighbors. I'm always fascinated about issues that you may not have even been aware of
Yeah.
that are concerns for people in their day-to-day life. And I think when you run for office or you're supporting somebody with petitions that is running for office, you want them to know that this is what affects our community.
Yep. Yeah.
I think it's a neat process, but I
It
think I'm
is.
the only one that thinks that. So we mentioned a little bit, you're talking to people, assessments, obviously a big issue. When you look at your campaign and if you are lucky enough to be elected, what are your main goals going to be?
But I want to ensure, like police, fire, EMS, all of that. I think that's a big topic.
Yes.
Ensuring they still have the tools they need to do their job. Ensuring that being in the Corning Police Department, the firefighters, those are the good guys.
Yeah.
Making sure that people in the community know that and support them. The other thing is funding for things like Parks and Rec.
Oh, okay.
Sports, recreational facilities, the pools. Like we're so blessed as a community to have those things, and those are things that I don't want to see go away.
Do you mind if we take a quick break and you stay with us?
Sure.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program because we are talking with Lisa Illig-Homan. Thanks again for being on the program.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, so I want to talk, we mentioned the Fourth Ward and some of the issues that you see there. What would you say the biggest issues are, not just for the Fourth Ward, but for Corning, because you're going to be making decisions for essentially both?
I think it kind of runs the gamut. People are concerned, again, about potholes. They're concerned about street sweeping, brush pickup. When do my leaves get picked up? Why do they get picked up so early? Kind of silly things like that. I think there are bigger issues that are going to come, things like the cannabis laws and stuff like that. So I think we're probably pretty status quo with a lot of other small communities in upstate New York of, it runs the gamut of things that are concerns.
Sure. Now, we were talking a little off the air. I didn't realize this, but you have a little bit of a history with the Corning City Council.
I do. My dad was the Fourth Ward. At the time, it was called Alderman in the city of Corning. So the same seat that I am running for from 1997 to 2003.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So you know all the tips. You got all the insider info.
I actually, he used to call me his chief political advisor because I never missed a meeting. I went to every meeting with him, even as an 8-year-old kid.
Really?
And really watched and learned from him, and it was great.
What's an 8-year-old kid doing at Corning City Council?
I would bring a notebook
Yeah.
and a pen and take notes, and we would recap on the way home. Yeah, it was funny.
So you've been, even if you didn't realize at the time, you've been active in politics your whole life.
Yeah, I've always been interested. My dad continues to serve, so they live up in Pulteney now, and he's the town supervisor of Pulteney. So it is a dedication,
Yeah.
for sure.
Did he endorse your campaign?
We are different parties.
Oh, really?
Interestingly.
I shouldn't have said that.
No, that's okay, but of course he will support me, 100%.
Good. Has there been any surprises along the way? I mean, this is early. You still have a lot of time, but has there been any surprises on the way?
I don't think so. I think doing petitions in March was tough,
Yes.
cold,
Yes.
and it's dark after work, right? So it's hard to go knock on people's doors in what feels like the middle of the night. So the petition process was very interesting and kind of surprising how formal and stringent it is. But I'm glad that part's out of the way, and now we're on to election season.
Now, what's next in the campaign?
So I just recently launched my Facebook page in the last couple days.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned
So
it.
check me out, Lisa Illig-Homan for Corning City Council. We are working on, door hangers, yard signs, things like that as I get out and knock doors. If I miss you, I want to leave something that lets you know that I was there with my contact info. And really just encouraging people to get out in November and vote.
Is Facebook the best way to get a hold of you if there's someone in the Fourth Ward that wants to know more about your campaign, or to maybe say, hey, this is a major issue for me, What do you think?
Yeah, they certainly can reach out to me on there. I actually also put my personal cell phone and my personal email on that Facebook page. So
Okay.
any of those means would be great.
So tell us the Facebook page again.
It's Lisa Illig Homan for Corning City Council.
And so if someone sees this interview and says, I want to be a part of this campaign, how can they help?
I would love for other people to help me knock doors. It's great to have company.
Yes.
I plan to go knock with Allison Hunt as well, so
Okay.
we can kind of tag team that. So knocking doors and just really spreading the word and spreading words of encouragement.
And I know Allison is this way. I don't want to speak for you, but is that going to be one of your major goals, trying to hit everybody's house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not quite as crazy as Allison.
Well,
she
yeah,
did
Allison's next
the
level.
whole
Yeah.
city. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's amazing. But yeah, that is definitely one of my goals. Knock on every door. Like I said, I'm meeting neighbors that I knew 20 years ago that I didn't know were my neighbors. So it's fun. It really is.
It is. And that's kind of going back to the petition process. That's kind of the pre-campaign, because you're doing the same
Yep.
thing, right? So you get to speak to the voters directly. And
Yep.
I know as a voter, I love when someone comes to the door, because you can talk to them and find out about the candidate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So just before we go, what would you say to voters? I know there's a little time left, but what would you say to voters? I know you're going to be, other than warning them that you're going to knock on their door, what would you say to them before they head to the election booth?
I would just say that I can knock on every single door and put every single yard sign up, but if people don't get out and vote, it's all for naught. So to exercise that right that we all have, whether you vote for me or not, just make sure that you get out and vote in November.
Because we talk about on this program so much the importance of community.
Yeah.
And that's what I think that you're echoing here, that you're worried about, not worried about the community, but you want to make sure that the community is a better place with you in it, right?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to do was move back here and raise my kids, and I want my kids to want to move back here and raise their kids, and on and on. So that is top of mind for me.
Well, Lisa, thanks so much for being on the program this morning. I
Thank
hope we
you.
can do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thanks,
well,
Frank.
Yeah, of course, anytime. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thanks again to Lisa Illig Homan for being on our program. Imagine being 8 years old and going to city council meetings. I know many grown-ups that have never been to a city council meeting. So we appreciate her being on the program. And I want to remind everyone, because there's a lot of people out there that have decided to make that jump and be a part of their community and run for office. So if you are running for office, contact me. I'd love to do an interview like we just did with Lisa Illig Homan, or if there's somebody that you know that's running, give them my contact information, because I'd love to talk to them and highlight their campaign. And of course, we've said this before, this goes for any party. Come on the program and we'll learn a little bit about you and try to help you along in that process, because we want to make, as best as we can, make this a better community for all of us. And I think one of the ways we do that, we actually talked to former Congressman Tom Reed not that long ago, and he was talking about the importance of running for office and getting involved in the community, because unfortunately we mentioned not that long ago that according to poll numbers, people are they're losing faith in faith. They're losing faith in community. They're not involved in their community. They're not patriotic. That's obviously unsettling. And I think if you get more involved, whether it's through charitable organization, I'm not saying politics is the cure-all, but if you get involved in politics and try to make the change and try to make our community a better place, and that's our goal here on Frankly Speaking. That's why I always ask you to reach out to me and be a part of the discussion. We are talking about the New York bailout. You know what? That's a good segment, though. We're talking about the lack of patriotism. I didn't mean to jump to this, and it's not affecting us locally, but we get discouraged when we see people saying they're not patriotic, or they just have given up in some way, maybe because of politics, maybe just because of people blame everything on this, but COVID. This was kind of a little bit of heartwarming, a little bit of distressing story coming from the New York Post. So there's a restaurant owner that plays the national anthem every day, which is kind of interesting, something you don't see everywhere. And to show you how, and I think the media has a big role in this, to essentially laugh at patriotism or to laugh at being proud of this country. So people went on to virtue signal, went on to tweet such things as, "This would be my worst nightmare," because they showed a video of everybody standing at the national anthem. "This is my worst nightmare. That's terrifying. This feels like a real life horror movie." Unbelievable. That's just because people expressed their love of this country. So the owner, Janine Polino, And the restaurant's called Rainbow Oaks. It's in Fallbrook, California, I believe it was. Said, I feel like if we take a few minutes out of the day to be grateful for the men and women who have made the sacrifices so that we can stand up and say how we feel. And she said how she felt, meaning the person who said it was their worst nightmare. And I wish she realized that it's because those men and women who made those sacrifices that she was able to do that. I know that's a little bit of a off the wall as we were talking about the budgets, which I swear we'll get to in just a moment. Get back to that discussion. I just thought it went from a negative story to a positive. They're not giving up on it. They're still going to go stand for the national anthem daily. And I just thought it ended up heartwarming. But back to that. Sorry, I got on another tangent here this morning. That's the kind of morning we're having on Frankly Speaking. So let's go back to the New York State budget. Governor Hochul was surrounded by prosecutors. I think Mayor Adams was there celebrating the new bail law changes, really hyping up something that adds no substance, that is not going after criminals. She said this budget is a budget that clearly will make our city and our communities safer. This is Mayor Adams, which is interesting because Mayor Adams wanted more. He wanted more teeth. He didn't like the fact that these bail reform laws are making it so dangerous in the city, but also in upstate, of course. So she's bragging about it. But I think she has to brag about it because Lee Zeldin was so successful at attacking her on her weak on crime stance. So that ties in with what I wanted to mention with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. He released a statement yesterday, and he weighed in there. It's quite a lengthy quote. I'm not going to go through the whole quote, but he touched on some of the major issues that we're mentioning here this morning. And let's start, again, this is Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Let's start with bail reform. The governor promised to use her executive authority to adopt the needed reforms to our bail and criminal justice laws in the budget to help New Yorkers be safe and feel safe. And he continues, however, the resulting actions did little, if anything, to address public safety and the crime crisis plaguing communities all across our state. New York still remains the only state in the nation that does not allow judges to consider the dangerousness of an individual to a community when determining their pre-trial release. This budget does not provide the needed changes to bail and discovery laws, raise the age, and the unchecked parole board that continues to release dangerous and violent individuals back into our community. And I know Assemblyman Phil Palmisano has been very outspoken on that with the unchecked parole boards. But to go back to his statement and something that we've been saying since the budget passed and really predicting it before the budget passed, this does not make us safer. What she proposed does give judges a little more leeway when it comes to felons and high-level misdemeanors. But as we highlighted yesterday, you could go in front of a court to get arraigned for shoplifting. And you could literally say to the judge, could we hurry this up? I have to go to the local department store and steal a suit for my next trial. And he could not take that into consideration and say, wait a minute, maybe we should set high bail on this. No, this is literally letting criminals, it's coddling criminals, as I keep mentioning. It's giving them almost a pat on the back for their crimes. But Assemblyman Phil Palmisano did not stop there. That is his statement on the bail reform, but he also continued about taxes. And unfortunately, it's not something we like to mention, but it's something that we've all experienced, that we've all felt, which is people leaving the state in droves. As a matter of fact, CNBC had a piece, and I wouldn't normally quote them, but it's with information coming from the IRS. In California and New York, so two very liberal states, New York and California, lost over $90 billion. And I think they lumped them together because we are always out trying to do each other with high taxes and radical policies. New data from the IRS shows that New York State lost $25 billion in adjusted gross income due to out-migration, due to people leaving the state. And that's in 2021 alone. On top, okay, so that's 2021 alone, $25 billion that we lost. In 2020, we lost $20 billion because of out-migration, which is a fancy way of saying people leaving. The biggest winner in our poor policy decisions, again, Florida. The Sunshine State gained a net 128,000 households in 2021, I should say, bringing over $39 billion in income. So, not weighing in on that specific article, of course, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano saying New York families and businesses already face the highest taxes and worst business climate in the nation. Even as seniors, families, farmers, and businesses still battle crippling inflation, this budget continues an unsustainable path of uncontrolled spending and increased debt, while extending business tax increases by nearly $3 billion. And we talked about many of the wasteful spending policies in this budget yesterday. You know, what was it, $700 million for Hollywood handouts. The budget will increase taxes on county property taxpayers, so be aware. It does not provide much needed relief to small businesses to address their increased unemployment insurance cost assessment, or assessed on them, by this administration to pay back funds borrowed from the federal government to pay for COVID unemployment claims. Yes, it's actually going to piggyback off of what Assemblyman Palmisano was saying here, it's only going to hurt our small businesses when we have that major increase in minimum wage. Now, I know many on the far left thought it wasn't enough. The minimum wage should be $21.25, but $17 on our small businesses. You know, I'm lucky enough to be broadcasting here from beautiful Market Street. What does it do for our small businesses that I can see right here across the street? Well, one thing, it means probably not going to hire new people on even if you need them. It also may mean you have to lay people off, or it may see your employees leave because the person who just walked in the door is getting paid the same as the person who's worked there 5 years and earned that $17. And then he continued, however, the governor and Democrat majorities did make it a priority to provide $1 billion to New York City for the illegal migrant situation, which I don't know if we'll have time, but I'd love to talk about that a little bit later on, and to provide $700 million in tax credits to Hollywood millionaires for the Hollywood Film Tax Credit. Such misplaced priorities at a time when, going back to Phil's point, when we have inflation, where we're struggling to put gas in our tank, we're struggling and figuring out budgeting ways, for meals, for heaven's sakes, and we're just putting on more spending at New York State, increasing the debt. And finally, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano saying, in addition, alarmingly, this budget continues a path towards a radical, unaffordable, and unreliable energy plan for New York, which we were mentioning earlier. It's whatever you want to say. If you believe in the green energy programs being proposed here in New York State and throughout the country, that's fine. You want to drive an electric vehicle, that's fine. But the market should be the reason why you do that. It shouldn't be the government saying, you have to do this. You know, we go back to Andrea Stewart Cousins' comment. We'll let you live in your house. We'll let you keep your gas stove. That's not the mindset you should be having. But we get away from the free market idea because apparently that's not what they're pushing in Albany at all. The technology, the grid is just not there. But it's more important for people in Albany and more important for people in Washington to push, and I use the term virtue signaling, but to say, look, I'm doing something. See, I'm the most green. We care the most. And in the end, it just hurts, no matter what Andrea Stewart Cousins says. In the end, it just hurts you and I, the residents of the state, and the residents, of course, of the country. Continuing, finally wrapping up here on what the Assemblyman had to say. It provides for a ban on natural gas in new buildings that eliminates energy choices for families and businesses on how they want to heat their homes, cook their food, and power their buildings. It is the first step in a plan to fully electrify all of New York State, including power generation, buildings, and transportation. It is unsustainable for the grid. It will increase the risk of potential blackouts, drive up utility, construction, and home business retrofit and conversions, and the costs there, and seriously jeopardize the future reliability of our energy supply for all New Yorkers. And that's such a good point, that think of a blackout situation. We had a scenario not that long ago where we had a viewer write in and say they were without power for a week. If you imagine that in the middle of the winter, here in what is typically a very cold area in the winter, imagine you don't have any power, you don't have any heat, you don't have anything. You can't even cook, for heaven's sakes. This is just a wrong-headed decision from Albany, all in the name of saying we're doing something. We did it before California. Keep this in mind. I know we had Joe Sempolinski on the other day, and we sent out a warning to our friends in Pennsylvania. But keep these kind of policies in mind when you see some of the struggles New York is facing. Finally, it's just, and this again, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, it's just one more thing that will continue the exodus of more New York families, farmers, small businesses, and manufacturers from our state. And unfortunately, we all hope that's not the case. But if history has proven anything, that's the direction we're headed. We have to take another short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV Big Fox. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Yesterday, just as a highlight, and I don't know if this is coming from the budget, you perhaps have seen this, the town of Horseheads cracking down on the sticker shops. I know we've talked about it on the program extensively, closing down one of the sticker shops that they're dealing with. The town of Horseheads, they said, appreciates the compliance received from the business owner, and I like this part, and looks forward to the state of New York eventually accepting responsibility and forcing legislative authorized cannabis sales. Just as a highlight from the story we brought to you yesterday, and wondering how those crackdowns are going to begin. I want to thank the viewers who have been sending in. I was actually reading off the air. I was trying to catch up from all the viewers that have been sending in comments about the budget. One viewer saying that they moved. They watched the show, but they've moved to Tennessee. So you do have a lot of states that have benefited from our policies, which is very unfortunate, because we have a beautiful state. We would love to see people, going back to what we were saying earlier, run and trying to make a difference, but it's so difficult with obviously the far left in New York City. Hey, here's another odd New York story, but if you recall early on the program, one of the first programs, we were talking about the new Buffalo Bills stadium and the cost of taxpayers by the state, but also in the local areas. But, Governor Hochul really gave a multi-billion-dollar team a sweetheart deal. Now we're learning that the state and Erie County will be spending millions more on the existing Bills stadium. Yes, Ralph Wilson, I can't remember what it's called now, but the stadium in Orchard Park, they're still going to be spending millions on upkeep until the process begins on the new stadium, and that's all finished. Wow, how much did we spend as taxpayers on the new building, on the new complex? And now we're just adding more cost to that. Millions more will be spent, and this coming from the Buffalo News, on the existing stadium and related buildings on the Orchard Park campus over the next few years while the new stadium is under construction. Now, I only mention this because I think most of us would say that only makes sense. You can't have it deteriorate. You still got to be safe for fans. But you just add that on top of the overwhelming bill that we've had for a brand new stadium. As part of the existing lease deal, both Erie County and New York State will continue to chip in between $2.2 million to $2.4 million a year for maintenance, repair, and other capital improvement costs. The Bills are also contributing more than $900,000 a year as a percentage share of ongoing stadium costs. It's just interesting. The same with the original deal and how much it cost us as taxpayers. We sure gave the NFL team a heck of a break there. And I liked the Bills, don't get me wrong. I think the new stadium looks great. I just wish we weren't paying for it. And I just hope that you and I, the taxpayer who are paying for it, can afford tickets when it's all said and done. We'll take another quick break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We received a message because we were talking about the budget, and this is actually coming from a resident of Tennessee, but originally from New York, saying, quote, "I'm a resident of Tennessee. My primary reason for leaving New York was politics, high taxes, denying rights and safety for the unborn, okay, abortion issues, and economics all track along with the politics. Climate is actually at the bottom of my list for reasons for leaving. Yes, but that's a very good point. And yet that's what Albany is focused on. And the viewer continues, I'm representative of most of the people that I ask when in Tennessee. Quote, ask yourself, again, this is from a viewer, thank you so much. Ask yourself, if Democrat policies are so great, why are people leaving? And that's, and there was more there, and thank you for that. But in the interest of time, I kind of condensed it. That's one of the frustrations for so many people. We keep seeing wrong policy after wrong policy and saying, it didn't work last time, and now you're just adding more money to it, and it's not going to work again. The idea of doing the same thing over and over, I know it's become cliche at this point, but is the definition, and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, but it's what it feels like sometimes. Okay, last break, and then when we come back, we'll wrap up with our final segment here on Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Is hard to believe we are completely out of time. I want to thank, well, before that, but we are out of time, but I wanted to just highlight quickly, there's a really good piece from the New York Post editorial board about Biden playing these games with the debt limit. I know if you're, depending on what media outlet you go to, you would believe the group that actually did something on the debt limit, meaning the House Republicans, that they're to blame somehow, even though they're the one that put forth a very good, opening idea, something that could be negotiated. But Biden, even with those, which I think some would even argue didn't go far conservative enough, him saying that's a no-go. So it's actually the president and Senate Democrats who are playing the games. So keep that in mind, depending on what media outlet that you go to. But even as the clock ticks, and the Treasury chief flashes a red signal, Biden's determined to do small ball political brinkmanship to score seal claps, as they put it here, from his enablers in the media. And that's already been proven true numerous times. McCarthy's bill is a serious, workable offer. It's garnered praise from the nonpartisan committee for a responsible federal budget. And yet, Biden saying well, first of all, it's the only realistic plan so far. It is the only plan. But of course, the blame game from Biden and Democrats and the media trying to somehow blame it on Republicans. So you can find that at the New York Post. But we are out of time. Thank you again to Lisa Illig-Homan for being our guest on the program. She is a candidate for Corning City Council in the 4th Ward. I really enjoyed that interview because I love when people are talking about getting involved for the betterment of their community. So we appreciate her coming on the program. We'll have her on again shortly. But again, reach out to me. I would love to hear from you if you are running for office, or if you have any suggestions for interviews, or if you just want to talk. That's where you can reach me right there. Have a great day, everyone. This has been Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV Big Fox. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. I look forward to it already.